This time I'm going to have a look at steel conduit, and there'll be several videos on this, so I'm going to do it in a number of parts, so there's quite a lot to cover. And what we're talking about here is the heavy duty stuff as used in the UK. For those people who live in America, this is not EMT, this is pretty substantial stuff. You're not going to be bending this with your fingers or much else other than the actual machine in question. Now of course this is just a short piece I've cut off for demonstration purposes, and this time we're going to have a look at the sort of basic principles of it, the sort of tools you would need, and the various components that go with it, aside from the actual stuff itself. Now here I've got a piece of the conduit. This is just a short piece that I've cut off of the full length. When you actually buy this, it normally comes in lengths of around 3 metres long, sometimes 3.75 metres depending on who actually manufactured it. And this particular one is 20mm in diameter, so it's the outer diameter of the conduit there. That's probably the most common size. Also you can get 25mm, which again is a fairly common choice. And normally of course you'd use the larger ones for having more wires inside or larger wires. And although it doesn't sound like there's much difference between 20 and 25, in terms of the actual space inside, there is actually quite a significant difference between those. So 20 or 25 by far the most common. In theory you can get a 16, although that's a fairly unusual item and you'd have to really make a big effort to actually find some. And there are bigger sizes as well, starting with 32mm and then 40 and various sizes above that, but again they're not particularly common, they do have their uses. Now this particular piece is galvanised, hence it's got this shiny finish on there, and again that's a fairly common choice. The other common choice is black, which is kind of have enamel paint on there, exactly the same size and dimensions, and it's made of the same steel, just has a black painted finish rather than this galvanised one we've got here. Now so when you buy this, it comes in big long lengths of normally about 3 metres, and it's generally supplied with the ends already threaded, so there's a thread cut on the end here and of course the other end as well. But if you're going to be doing anything with conduit, cutting it up is going to be inevitable, and if you're going to actually cut it, in order for it to fit into pretty much anything, it is necessary to cut a thread onto the end that you've actually cut. And then the other thing you like to do is to make some bends in the conduit, and then you can have things say like this. And of course we need a bending machine to do this. Unlike the EMT or the thin wall stuff, which is quite common in North America, you're not going to be bending this with your hands or fingers. It's simply far too robust and solid for that. This is made of steel, and the wall thickness here is actually 1.6mm, so it is a pretty substantial material, not something that's going to get damaged, easily dented or bent out of shape without the proper tools. Now once you've cut the conduit to whatever length you want, you will of course need to thread the ends of it, and to do this you'll need a threading tool. Here's a fairly typical example. This is one that can do both 20 and 25mm threads, and you just change the thread by simply undoing these nuts here, and then you can just remove the actual cutting die here. It is the 20mm one, and then this piece is a guide which basically fits over the conduit there just to make sure it's straight with respect to the cutting piece. So just swap those over. These are all metric, so this is an M20, and of course the 25mm one is an M25. So let's put that together there. The thread pitch on these is 1.5mm, so in other words for every one rotation it moves along by 1.5mm. So if you wanted say 15mm of thread, which is about the usual sort of amount, then that's actually 10 turns of the handle. And in terms of using these, then the conduit will be secured in a vise, and then you simply place the tool over the end. See that guide just fits over there to keep it straight, and then it's a question of rotating the handle, and that will cut the thread into the end as required. And so we'll look at threading of course in more detail at a later time. Now as well as the conduit itself, there are various things which go with this, and first of which are these actual boxes. Now these are made of a cast material, it's some sort of cast iron, it says malleable on the back there. And again, as with the conduit, these are heavy duty substantial items. You can see the considerable wall thickness there on this particular box. Being cast, these do tend a fairly sort of rough looking finish, and again these are galvanised as well as with the conduit we've got here. And just as with the conduit, you can buy these in the black painted finish as well. In terms of using them, there's really no difference, it's just getting a different finish on the outside. And one thing about threading is once you've cut a thread, if you leave it exposed, this is the factory cut end here, then it will actually go rusty if left in the air, because of course the galvanised coating has been removed there. Now the boxes at the end, like these ones, are of course already threaded, and in terms of using these, there's a whole variety of these available. I've got a selection of different ones here, just 4 of these. This is just a single outlet here, or a terminal box. There's a T-shaped one there, so a right angle there, and this is like a U-box or something for the shape of that. There's actually a whole load of these which we don't have here. Pretty much any combination you can think of in terms of how many and what angles they're at, you can probably buy. Some may be more difficult to find than others. And in addition to having various outlets around the edges, you can also get them with the holes in the back. And that's useful, say you had it in a ceiling, you have the wires and things coming down the top, and then just looking through and going back out again, following the lighting circuits. And on the top here, we've got these 2 lugs. Again, these are pre-threaded. These are actually M4, 4mm metric threads, and these are used to secure the lid in position, or in some cases other things. Here's a typical lid just placed on there, and the 2 screws will go in. Screws often made out of brass, and again these are M4, so this was just placing the screw in the hole, and then that was tightened down to secure it in position. Now if you actually buy these, if you buy a box, then a box is all you get. You do not get a lid with it, you do not get any screws with it, and in fact you don't get anything at all other than the box itself. And the reasoning for this is because, although in quite a lot of cases you're just going to have this, say, as an intersection between, say, a run of conduit and drop down to a socket, you may well want a lid in that particular case. But there's plenty of other stuff that can actually go on the front of these, the most common and likely of which would be if you had, say, a lighting circuit, and this was up in the ceiling, upside down. You can put this in so it's flush with the finished surface of the ceiling, and then you can just put a ceiling rose directly over this, and these holes will line up with the holes in the ceiling rose because they're 2 inches apart, or 50 point whatever millimeters the metric equivalent is. So although you can get lids, lids are not the only thing which can fit on there. You can even get things like this, which is the same size as the top there, so it will go on there, and this has a threaded piece on the front, so you could have a piece of conduit coming out of there, as well as of course going in the side as well. And there's the various other things you can get to fit here. You could also get socket outlets and switches at one time which actually fitted directly on there as well. So you are going to need to buy some screws to go with it. Just say these are M4, these are 6mm in length, which is ideal just to go the surface there, just to fix on the lid or whatever. And the other thing to note here is another hole in the back, which is also threaded as an M4. There's a closer look there. And the purpose of this one is so you can connect a tag here, an earth wire, normally it's with a crimped ring terminal on the end. This screw we're going to go through the hole, and that's where you can connect the metalwork to earth using the appropriate wire there. And it's slightly raised so that on the back, see that the actual thing has a recess, and that's when you put the screw in, it allows the screw to go through, but it won't actually stick out beyond the back of this piece here, so that can be flush against the wall. It still gives you the space so you can actually get the screw in there and tighten it down properly. If this was flush, or some more on-board screws of the wrong length, then when you went to tighten it up, if it was on the wall, it would actually push against the wall and then try and press this away from the wall, and of course make a horrible mess. So when buying this stuff, bear in mind that if you order a box or a box of boxes or whatever, that's all you're going to get. If you want things like lids and screws and all the other bits and pieces, well, you just have to order those separately. And the other thing you can get, in particular with relation to the lids, you can actually get a rubber gasket which goes between the lid and the box, so when clamped down, of course, it provides a waterproof seal which may be useful when this stuff is outside. Now for attaching the conduit to boxes, this is a single box you'd fit in a wall to, of course they've got a socket or a switch or something on the front, and you will need some of these and probably one of these. Now this is a fairly standard wall box. This is the type which will be recessed in the wall and then plastered flush to the face of that. These have various knockouts by default, and you just knock out the appropriate one you would want. This is a 20mm hole, which means this 20mm brass bushing will fit through there no problem. And again, it all fits up with the 20mm conduit as well. Now these have a smooth inner surface and actually have a nice rounded edge here, so that the wires won't get damaged when they're pulled through. This is a coupler. Again, it's just another piece of the steel here, threaded inside. And of course one of these will obviously screw on there like that. And the idea is that you would put this through the hole in the box and then attach the coupler on the outside, and then your threaded conduit will of course thread in the other end like that. Now there's a practical problem here in that this is only a 20mm box, or 25mm box rather, and as you can see the 20mm conduit is basically the full width of that, so although these do physically fit, it's not a good idea to do that, because when you come to plaster this in, you've got literally about a 2mm veneer of plaster over the face of that, so probably not the best size to use. Now this is a 35mm box, and the difference here is that there's a considerable gap here on the front, so the actual hole is set back from the edge, but the deal will be attaching it will be pretty much the same. Pick the hole you want to pick out there, break through the hole that we want, take the brass bushing, that will fit through from the inside, and notice here then there's quite a big gap between the bushing and the front there, so obviously more space to get the things in. Place the coupler on the outside, and then your actual conduit will thread in the other end. There. So you'll end up with something like that. So this will be flush in the wall, this will have just a channel cut in the wall, and then this tape will be under the floor or whatever, going off to the next outlet box or wherever else. Now in terms of this bushing here, you do need to just tighten these up extremely well, because in most cases you're going to be using this as the actual earth for the actual fitting, so you need a good tight connection here, and of course you need to tighten it up, and you're not going to get a normal spanner in there. So what you need to get is one of these, which it says here is a bush wrench. This is one style, there is another style which has a sort of a V-shaped thing on the end, but they don't tend to work all that well. It's got two parts at the end, one is for the 20mm and the other is for the 25, again both are the most common sizes. And in terms of tightening up then, it's a question of placing this over the edge of the bushing in there, and so it just fits over like that, and then you can just tighten it up with the tool there. So once that's probably tightened, so this would be under the floor here, and that's ready for plastering, and notice you've got quite a good step there on the face, so this is not going to be sort of literally right up against the face of the plaster, causing it to crack. Now there are other types of couplers you get here. There's one called a flanged coupler, which is a similar design, except the head is actually flared out and might give a better connection on certain types of fitting, but again you don't have to use that, it's just a question of whatever is most appropriate. Now bushes come in usually a couple of different lengths, exactly the same size inside and everything, but just the thread length is somewhat shorter or longer, depending on what's appropriate for whatever you're screwing it into. Generally longer ones are more useful. And although they're fairly rare, you can also get female bushes, which are the same kind of idea, except the thread is on the inside, and these of course will fit over the male ones like that, although of course that's pretty much useless because that doesn't really achieve anything, but nevertheless they do exist. Now in theory you could put a female bush in there and then put the conduit up to it. The problem is it leaves a rather strange arrangement there, and you have to cut it fairly short. Another possible use for these is where you've got an open end, you can actually put one over the top there, and that will just put a much smoother edge on there, so of course you don't have the sharp bit showing, but again you're not going to be doing that because the end of the thing should also be screwed into a particular box. So yeah, they do exist, but in the real world not a huge amount of use there. Now the next item are these, which are locking rings. There's two styles available. This is just the cheapomatic hexagonal ones. And you can also get these nice milled edge ones, which generally look a lot better. And the purpose of these is if you've got the end of your conduit here and you're going to thread on the box, again you want to make sure that it's actually done up properly and tightly, so you can turn that around there, and then when it gets to the end of the thread you can of course just graunch that down a bit further until it's as tight as it can be. But of course there's a bit of a problem here, and just to zoom out there, if you're going to place this say flat on a wall, then of course at the moment we've got the conduit there just sticking up at some ridiculous angle, and of course you might actually want it so that the conduit was flat against the wall, which is fairly more likely. Of course that could lead to this actually being loose, depending on exactly where you put it. So the idea of the locking ring is to take the ring, place that onto the thread first, then you can tighten down the actual conduit box. In this case that's reasonably flat, and then if you tighten the ring down onto the end of the box, that will actually clamp it in position, and then you don't have the situation of either it being loose or of course sticking up at a silly angle. So if it was say there for example, you can then tighten the ring down and then that will lock that into position. Not necessarily compulsory to use, because if there's no bend immediately beyond, of course it doesn't actually matter, you can just tighten it down as far as it will go. But certainly you've got sort of various things where it's got to go around a curve or something with another box, say at the top there, then that's quite a useful item to have. Functionally they work the same, it's just the round ones look better because they've got the middle finish, rather than just these nasty square or hexagonal varieties. Now when it comes to actually fixing this to the wall, you will need some of these. These are saddles which attach the conduit to the wall. These normally go in two parts, so there's a piece here with a single hole, that's what will go on the wall, and then once that is on the wall, the conduit goes here, and then the piece goes over the top there. This has some sliding arrangement there, and then you just tighten up the screws to secure that to the wall as required. Now this is a fairly standard one, it's just basically a stamped out pressed metal there. You can also get ones like this which have a cast base, and again the piece goes over the top, it's just a stamped out item. Same idea, there's just a single hole in the middle. The difference here is that there's more space between the actual wall and the conduit, so if you put one of those on there it will obviously move it away from the wall slightly, so you've got more space behind, and you can get a couple of styles of these. This is the smaller one, you can get one to actually stick it out from the wall at a considerable distance. The only thing with these is to remember that you have to fix these to the wall before you install the conduit, because of course the fixing screw is in the middle, so once the conduit's in place you can't actually get to it, so it's a question of put these on the wall first, then install the conduit and various boxes, and then these go over the top afterwards to secure it in position. So look there, metal conduit and the various tools and other things that go with it. And in terms of installing this, it's important to note that when you're going to be doing this, the whole idea of this stuff is that you install the entire conduit system first, and this means all the boxes and the end bits and the junction things, whatever else. And if it was going to be plastered in the wall, you have all the plastering done, whatever else. And then once that's done, you would then return and then actually draw the wires and things through it afterwards. It is definitely not the case of doing bits of it and trying to thread the wires through and put boxes on the end with the wires in there and all of that. So it's just one step first, and then the wiring actually goes in as a entirely separate thing later. And of course this means it has to be installed properly, so you can actually draw all the wires in. We don't have sort of dead ends and right angle boxes buried in the wall and whatever, because of course that would make it impossible. This also has the big advantage that at a later date it's very easy to then remove the wiring and make changes to it, so you don't actually have to start digging the place apart. Now, steel conduit is quite an expensive system to install, mainly because of the time involved, and also the parts of course generally cost more than not bothering. But it is a high quality choice and something which probably should be used a lot more often. Now of course in other episodes we'll have a look at the various tools and things in more detail, actually how to use them. And just one point for the end of this, although this is a threaded type of conduit, there is a horrid system available which you can get called Conlock, and it's basically along the same lines, same sort of size and everything, but you don't have to thread the ends. The boxes have a little grub screw in the top and they're not threaded, so you just shove it in and then sort of tighten it down with a wrench or something to fix it. It's much quicker to do and you don't have to thread the ends, but unfortunately it's a bit of old crap, because the fact it's not threaded means you're just relying on that tiny little grub screw. So in theory it might have a sensible connection between, but in theory maybe not. It's not going to be waterproof because there's a slip fit between the various components. Its only advantage is it's a quicker way of installing it, but unfortunately it's also a nasty and horrible way of doing it as well. So we'll have a look at the other things next time, but until then, thanks for watching.